Today I'm talking with Alex Murphy, CEO of Jobs Inc., about the recent news that Facebook is shutting down its jobs marketplace everywhere outside the US and Canada. Alex, good to see you again.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me, Chris.
So after 4 years, Facebook has had enough of job listings, it seems. Tell us why you think they made this decision.
Why they make this decision? I guess there's probably a handful of reasons. I would guess that, as a company that's extremely data driven, what they saw was that it doesn't line up with what their long-term strategy is, right? So they've recently announced, obviously, the conversion to Meta as a name, but just in general, the doubling down on the VR experience and what that means for their business. And, it's about resources and allocation of resources and what's going on. So at the end of the day, they don't see this as being part of that larger strategy. And so they decided to pull the plug, which is something that I think that they do in a really healthy way as an organization. I mean, I don't agree with it from the perspective of like understanding their users. Presumably almost all of their users have jobs and transition between jobs, and being part of that experience seems to be like a really, really good thing. I find it kind of surprising in some other respects, but I think at the end of the day, there's somebody in a position that's looking at the data, that's seeing a trend, and they don't see it having as much traction as they decided that it needed to.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they executed it totally that well. I think they could have done things better, in other words, to make it a more viable solution. I mean, if you ask people today, about the Facebook jobs, half of them don't want to use it because they don't want to mix their personal stuff with their work life. And it did seem to attract a lot of low-level listings over this last 4 years or so. I've heard the word spam used a lot with Facebook jobs. But what's your sense around that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's changed materially since they launched was that when they launched, they came out with a lot of gusto about, we're going to change the way that resumes are done. In fact, there really won't be a need for a resume in the future because we're going to solve that problem. And they made other kind of similarly, I guess, big change the world types of statements that didn't come true, right? And so, the resume is still here. I actually get in this debate with people quite frequently. Like, it's like what a resume looks like may change. It actually has changed. Resumes used to be paper, and
Right.
Now they're digital representations, right? And in the past, it was really important for it to be one page, but now it's really not that important for it to be one page because it's digital, right? And all it is a reflection of what you've done, right? What have you done, for whom, and when did you do it? That set of experiences will always be part of the conversation for hiring. Whether you call it a resume or something else doesn't really actually matter all that much. As it's related to like the other parts, right? The other big thing that they came out with, that they let go of from a paradigm perspective, was that they wanted to make sure that the candidate experience, the user experience, was going to be on Facebook. And so early on, you had to apply while on Facebook, and you couldn't leave, and you couldn't get jobs onto the Facebook jobs marketplace that didn't support that native application experience using your Facebook profile.
Yeah.
In recent years, they got away from that, and it ultimately created a pretty huge leak, if you will, right? Like all these users that ended up in the jobs marketplace leaving to go to an ATS to apply resulted in, a user experience that was very disjointed. And this is true across the spectrum of job boards in the world that have an offsite application experience. Obviously, we're really long and bullish on enabling an on-site and native or hosted application experience. But they let go of that. That created leaks. I would imagine that data is something that was part of the equation, right? Is, at the end of the day, Facebook is working towards the ability to generate more engagement that drives more ad views, that drives more ad revenue, and leaks in the system are not good for driving more and ongoing engagement with their users.
With the Facebook resume stuff, though, they haven't did a great job at like getting people to fill in their stuff, I don't think.
Yeah, interestingly,
Initially.
Like I think there's always a very big disconnect, right? So like, even if you updated your information in an application, it didn't mirror into your Facebook profile.
Oh yeah.
Right. So like they intentionally kind of created some separation between what you were going to submit in your application and what would be visible in your profile, so that you would not have kind of a blending and an unintentional consequence of data flowing in. I would guess, I have no insight into this from internals in terms of any kind of direct statement, but certainly this has always been lingering, right? The settlement that Facebook had around Facebook ads and kind of a couple protected types of advertising, be it like real estate and jobs were two of the big ones. You know, I like,
yeah, once
at
that
some
got killed, it seemed like it killed all the momentum for any kind of just recruiting initiative, products.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ironies, right? Like they're putting this down, and the irony is that by simply turning it on, Facebook became really like should have been the number 2 source of applicants for every company in the country.
Yeah,
and all sorts of applicants, right? We've seen people that get hired in low skill wages and entry level, but senior too, right? Like data scientists and DevOps engineers, really difficult to find people because everybody peruses Facebook from time to time. At least every type of person does.
yeah.
And so they put this thing down that would have been the number 2 recruitment business in the country if they had double down on investing around like what their business model was going to be. I think it's peculiar.
Yeah, and they with sourcers too. Like sourcers were used to be able to search Facebook for people, keywords, things like that, and that got trashed away too. And I still today, I think that was a huge miss on their part. I mean, that sourcing aspect of it too.
Yeah. I think a lot of people try to think about like, LinkedIn is this professional network and Facebook is this social network. And the reality is that both of them have lots of people, right? And people do lots of things that are both social, and also they do things that are professional. And getting access to people and finding them and networking with them is what these systems, really kind of got their early legs under them by enabling, right? And so that loss, I think, is unfortunate. But at the end of the day, like they've clearly made some decisions strategically that what they bought with Oculus. And I mean, I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday. It's difficult to find a company that has executed acquisitions as well as Facebook, right? You think about Instagram, you think about WhatsApp, you think about Oculus. Like these are massive acquisitions, billions and billions of dollars, and they have not shut them down. They've actually helped them flourish. And what they've seen with Oculus and the VR, and I watch my kids when they get into it, like there is nothing that is as engaging as a virtual reality experience. And so whatever they've got cooked up, is interesting. Ironically, we had a guest on our roundtable early last year that talked about the Oculus and VR as being a game changer for recruiting. And it's again, it kind of goes into the unfortunateness, right? It's like they've invested in Facebook at work. They had a massive amount of early success. The original reason to put Facebook jobs up as a content type is because people were running searches in Facebook for jobs, right? And it's not like that's going to stop. They're just not going to have a good experience any longer, right? And people might say it wasn't as good of an experience as it could be. It was much better, orders of magnitude better than what it was before, where pages or posts from 6 years ago might be the thing that you see in the first position. getting job content is far, far better.
I'll tell you what I'm not going to miss is the pop-up keep saying, hey, do you want to turn this into a job listing? Whenever I post something on Facebook, it's ever present in my daily interaction platform.
I imagine that there probably were several things where the pursuit of trying to make the jobs business be more pervasive through the platform probably helped it jump the shark a little bit and put it into this place where it's like, all right, this needs to go to the penalty box. This is not like jobs is going away entirely.
Yeah, break down what's going to happen actually for employers.
So I think it's still, there's still a little bit of TBD in this, right? So I think, you mentioned like the marketplace is going away everywhere other than the US and Canada. My understanding, maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the jobs marketplace is going away entirely.
No more, can't go to facebook.com/jobs.
Right, like that won't exist anymore. Yeah, so the what will exist is the ability for a company to post jobs into a jobs tab on their company page, and then a candidate, so this is my understanding again, is that will be true for companies in the US and Canada, and that an applicant can apply, and that the engagement with that applicant will happen through Facebook Messenger. And so
now you wonder why would they shut down marketplace? I mean, you're effectively muting the ability of that job to get applicants at that point. So why even bother keeping the job posting alive right now, even just for the company page? Because they've also tamped down company page feeds and posting the algorithm, and you only see a small portion of those if you're following a company. So it almost seems like they've killed it essentially, but they're still letting people post jobs in hopes that they're going to get somebody.
I think it's a great question. I don't see, again, I think about the Oculus as being so amazingly engaging, that VR and being able to do a virtual interview, right? Like we're having this conversation on Zoom, it's on video, I can see you, we cue off of each other. Like it's just that much more when you move to a virtual reality experience than a two-dimensional, 3-inch by 3-inch window pane.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I just tried Oculus recently. My daughter brought home, one of her friends had it. How do you see that coming into the recruiting world? You talk about a video interview. Why do a video interview? I mean, what's the advantage of that over face-to-face?
Well, so in a VR environment, right, you can, with the right software and kind of like where these things go, right? So I feel like VR is kind of circa 1991 on the World Wide Web, right? In terms of like where it's going to go. Ultimately, I would imagine that something that's like on the doorstep is a device that sits, or two devices that sit kind of outside or around the person. So you're kind of you're in your grid, and it can capture you. So there's a full 360 representation of what your body is doing, at which point you have all these physical cues in a more three-dimensional sense. And I don't know what you did when you were on the Oculus, but I went skiing, right? And like, I can feel my legs kind of wobbling as I'm going down the mountain. Yeah. And I'm literally just riding along with a person. And, where that could go, from your imagination is really quite remarkable.
I just tried some of the basic stuff in there, like the office thing. I got dizzy on that thing, but
I think a lot of people do, right?
Yeah.
It's really tricking your brain. And I think that's ultimately to the reason around why would you do it? It's like, well, because you're kind of tricking your brain into having a physical interaction experience, which is different than a video experience, which is different than a phone call, right? And so in each one of these mediums, you're getting closer and closer to this other person, with the benefit of being able to be anywhere in the world, right? So we can have like a board meeting with everybody sitting at the table, kind of in a quasi-physical environment, even though we're all in different countries. Like that's kind of remarkable when you think about it. If we bring it back to the jobs world, it's a miss, right? Like they reacted in 2016 and 17 to build this capability to have jobs, because they were reacting to what their users were doing, because employment's a really big deal to people, right? What they do during their work hours for work, for income is a really, really big deal. And for them to kind of just shut it off, I don't really get. And if I take that back to like, why continue to have the tab, my best guess is that somebody said, let's not kill it off entirely. Let's let this kind of activity happen inside the tabs. That's really muted, and almost like it's an overreaction to maybe some of the things that weren't as good, right? Like having all of these experiences where you've got jobs, the same job coming in from multiple sources, where the company can't control whether or not it's their job. We just got a report today of a client of ours asking for help about removing fake jobs that are using their brand. Right. So there's a lot of stuff at play in there, I'm sure, that kind of accumulates to a point where you go, look, this isn't worth it. We're not making enough money.
Yeah.
And then they probably ask the question, what do we make money at with it? And that's part of the reason to keep that tabs program going, because you will be able to boost your job, which means that those jobs will show up in people's news feeds. And that means that you'll get more applicants. And there might be something that becomes a new starting point, new foundation to build a new version of the product.
They
There's
basically left
also
the paid product in place.
yeah, exactly. And there is a beta program that has been they've been working on that it's not known who's in the beta program in terms of partners with Facebook on this, but where there is a paid kind of boost your jobs program that will from my understanding, it incorporates a lot of the same existing infrastructure that's there. So they're not turning it all off. It's more like they're hitting a big, fat, gigantic reset button, taking it down to kind of near zero and see where they can build it back up from. But even with all of that said, at the end of the day, their strategy 5 years ago, it was different than their strategy is today, right? Yeah. And what the metaverse means as a kind of as a center point, and all of our understanding about the inputs that drive their, the variables, if you will, that drive their revenue, they all kind of feed into like engagement, and they obviously are looking at the data in every possible angle, and they recognize that two things. One, the jobs engagement isn't generating enough revenue, and there are other services that they are investing in and focusing on, like VR, are driving massive engagement. And so they are, they're just reallocating their bets at the end of the day. You kind of got to respect it. So many people just get mired in continuing to fight the fight for the purpose of fighting the fight, and don't recognize something that doesn't get them what they actually ultimately want.
So the other side of the coin is, these big tech giants, changes their mind, seemingly on a whim sometimes. And I've got a client on Facebook Jobs. They're pissed off now because they're losing a source of traffic. Even going back to myself, I started a social resume tool called Career Cloud 8 years ago. They shut down that whole API on me, and it seems like these tech giants just, they start stuff, they want you to come in and develop on top of it, and then they pull the rug out under you a lot of times.
At the end of the day, it's an interesting point, because they're going to be dependent upon people writing apps into Oculus, and there's a
why trust them now? I mean, you've seen it time and time again where they're pulling the rug out on the developers.
I won't name names on this, right? But like I do love the saying. I think it started with Oprah. She probably got it from somebody else, right? When people tell you who they are, believe them. And Facebook has proven time and again that they're going to give you the opportunity to come in and develop stuff and teach them. And once they've learned enough, they're going to shut you down, right? And we had a partner that we were really trying to push to do some specific custom things to support the Facebook Jobs program. And this partner said, we will not invest 1 hour of tech time into supporting anything for Facebook, because we've gotten burned over and over again, trying to do things because they said, this is going to be so good for your users, only to have that program shut down. We just won't do it. We won't support it. We won't even present it as being something that's a feature for our customers. Even if they can get it through you, we will not actively participate in it
Right.
because of this, right? Because of that behavior that you're talking about from, 5 years ago, 8 years ago. Will that bleed into what happens for them on the VR side? I don't know. At the end of the day, they've got what everybody wants, which is they've got audience, right? And, the Facebook Jobs program, which isn't like an overnight thing, right? It wasn't like a quick hit. This is 5 years, right? Like that
Yeah, 2017, right? They started it.
they launched it at the end of the second half of 2017. They've been working on it since 2016. So, I mean, whatever you want to call it in there, 4.5 years of being live and 5-year program, that's a reasonable experiment. They invested real money. They hired great people from all around the industry. The team that's there, that's been working on the jobs product, I feel really bad. There are a lot of people there that have, made career changes to go join, and like this is shocking news to them too, I think. So, it's I don't think it's a decision that they made lightly, but I think it's one that they made with a lot of, kind of definitive data driving what that decision-making process was.
So how is JobSync changing to reflect all this? I think on your blog, talk about you're moving something called Facebook Leads or something like that, but tell me more about how you're transitioning your platform off the.
So, I mean, there's no secret about it, right? For us, this is really unfortunate news. Like our customers that were using the Facebook Jobs Marketplace generated a lot of applicants. They made hires. They had good experiences, and they are all, I'll say, saddened and impacted by this decision. For us, from a strategic perspective, it doesn't really change anything, because our strategy has been around how to help automate things that recruiters do, talent acquisition teams do in the process of finding applicants. And that stretches into, all sorts of job boards all around the world, whether the candidate can leave the site or it's an email to apply or an Indeed apply type of experience. Any of the easy apply programs. We are continuously on the pursuit of building those integrations into any kind of job board publisher experience out there. We had previously looked at the Facebook ads product, and specifically the ability to create a lead generation program within Facebook ads, which is something that runs independent of the jobs marketplace. They're completely disconnected from each other. And what we learned was that, number one, this is a great source of applicants. It's really kind of the way to buy advertising to try to scale up the number of applicants that you get from Facebook. So you buy a Facebook ads program, and instead of the person leaving Facebook to apply on an applicant tracking system, they can fill out a lead form instead, very much like an application form on a job posting, right? And so what we've been working on for a little bit more than 6 months now is, one, to be able to get the leads out of Facebook and be able to deliver them into an applicant tracking system without a person having to touch it at all. And so we just recently launched that with our first beta customer on that. And then 2, to actually take the application requirement for any given job posting and to be able to create a Facebook ad with that application requirement set as the lead form. So effectively taking the whole concept of putting up a job posting with the required fields to submit an application, and to actually push that in as an ad, and then put media spend against it. And so that's something that we'll be rolling out over the course of this quarter, first with a couple beta customers, and then starting to actually push it out to a lot more other customers. The advantage is that the lead export system that we've built is extremely resilient and does not require manual work, which is what really Facebook lead programs today, the biggest struggle is trying to get your kind of low code, no code type of integrations to work correctly. And then
What
they
would it,
break.
what would a lead look like when you parse it into the ETS at that point? Is it like they started the application at that point in the ETS? Or
It could either be they started or they completed, depending upon what the job is and what the question set is that a candidate is required to answer. So
Okay.
one of the things that we do a lot of is we'll break apart the application if it's really long, make it shorter so you can get like kind of a first step lead, find out if they're interested, get a couple screening questions, determine whether or not you want to advance them in the process, and then ultimately help them move down the review cycle, if you will, the interview cycle within the company and within the ATS.
Interesting. Well, I'd like to hear more about that when she has more data around how it's working. So definitely come back and tell us more. Last question for you, Alex. So given that Facebook is kind of giving up on jobs here and they've shut down a lot of stuff over the years, do you ever foresee someone like Google doing something like that with the Google for Jobs platform? I see some similarities there where they shut down Google for Hire, their ATS a while back. They haven't had a whole lot of news coming out of Google for Jobs in the last year or two, but what do you think about that? You think Google would ever give up on jobs too?
So I think answering this question becomes difficult as a Murphy, because it's like whatever I answer, it's bound to go the opposite direction, right? So what I think is materially different, right, is that Facebook's world is driven by engagement with content on Facebook's platform to drive ad revenue. And what Google's platform is all about is organizing information for the purpose of phenomenal search results, right? And so what started out as a simple single search bar in Google to go search for everything evolved into these kind of more verticalized search experiences, and then wrapping them together in universal search. So now if you search on Milan, right, or Springfield, you'll see a map right in there. You'll also see references to kind of where it is, specific information. You've got like data and information boxes, all of that kind of vertical search pieces, like the maps is a good example, being brought into your main search page. Jobs is no different, right? And what really, really gets underneath of the search engineer's skin at Google is when the best that they can actually get at from their universal search, their basic search, is a list of other companies' search results pages. Because at the end of the day, what Google wants to do is they want to find what is the best result to surface for this search. And sometimes that requires more input data. That's true for commerce. That's true for real estate. That's true for airlines. That's true for a whole slew of different categories, jobs being one of them. And I think that their announcement this summer with the leaning in towards a direct apply experience represents and demonstrates a real understanding of what the applicant experience is like when a person has to go from job site to job site to job site, not knowing whether or not they're actually applying to a job or not. And Google is saying, look, if you can identify this job as a direct apply experience, that's a signal that job will get greater relevance in the search results. It's going to be seen by more candidates. That's going to generate a better candidate experience, a better user experience. All of that said, right? If you want to just take it back to money, Google makes hundreds of millions of dollars in recruitment advertising already, right? You run a search on Google for anything like nurse jobs, sales jobs, whatever, you already see lots of AdWords, right? So the Google for Jobs experience just simply makes Google a better place to go run job searches. That drives more search activity. That drives up their capacity to fulfill the demand for more clicks. So, I mean, whereas Facebook, I think really saw lots of engagement and leaks and not a lot of money. Google's already making lots of money, and Google for Jobs simply makes the experience better, and that helps cement and ensure that they continue to make more money in that category. So in a lot of respects, they're in very different places in this kind of, call it, experiment, if you will.
Good stuff, Alex. I always enjoy talking to you, man. We seem to have a good rapport on this subject, so appreciate the feedback. And jobsync.io for the audience out there. By the way, we're going to feature the JobSync roundtables on our RegTech Media podcast channel every month now, so looking forward to those. Who's coming up on the next one, Alex?
So we've got a great conversation actually tomorrow with a wonderful HR leader, Heidi Pancake, talking about whether or not we're setting up our newest members of our workforce for success and how to engage with them and talk to them, and we'll link it together from not just what is it that's happening inside of employee engagement, but also how we set up for success as we start to bring them in from the recruiting process, kind of thinking about what our desired outcomes are, starting at the very, very beginning of the process, which starts when somebody's just starting the application.
Yeah, one of the great names in HR, by the way, Heidi Pancake. So I'm looking forward to chatting with her then.
It's going to be awesome. I can't wait to hear about our trip. I know that American Airlines and her have had an ordeal over the last 10 days.
Okay, very cool. All right, well, Alex Murphy from JobSync, again, appreciate your time today, and thanks for joining us here on RegTech.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate being here.